I'm Anthony Winston III. I am the owner and founder of Winston Engineering. As Javier just said, I'm a licensed electrical engineer by trade. And he reached out to me about doing this presentation because EV seems to be the big buzzwords now, especially with all the zero emissions requirements. So I've been in the EV space for quite some time now, but I'll give you a bit more detail on that. Here's the agenda. I don't think we have too much time, so I'll try to make this as interactive as possible, so feel free to ask any questions that pop in your mind. But here's a loose agenda. I'll talk about the company a little bit and how we started, the current landscape in EV, as well as what the zero emission goals are set forth by. I'm gonna focus primarily on Canada and the US. What we do as electrical engineers in the EV infrastructure space, going into best practices, talk about some of the projects that we've done, and then talk about how do we potentially meet those goals that are pretty lofty, and then Q&A. So here's a quick history of the company. I got my PE, so my PE is my professional engineering license in the States in 2014. And from there, I was working in government defense, and I knew I couldn't use that PE very well in that space. So I took a pay cut and worked for an electrical contractor. And once I really got my hands on some electrical drawings for buildings, I'm like, this is much simpler than missile and radar systems. And so I was driving an hour to the train station, then taking another hour and a half into downtown LA every day. And instead of sitting on my phone, on social media, I Googled how do you start a business. And I figured if I can design and renovate a house off YouTube, I can probably start a business. And that was in 2015. And so I was doing both for a while, answering calls on the construction site for my company. There was no conflict of interest. I let my employer know. And I signed a large enough project one day that I was able to walk away, and that was 8 years ago. When I started out, it was just me, solo entrepreneur, doing everything by myself, the marketing, answering the phones, the designing, everything. And I was working on residential, commercial buildings. I pretty much didn't turn anything down, and I was getting overworked. And so I started hiring more individuals, and architects, developers, general contractors would ask, hey, do you do mechanical and plumbing engineering? One day I just said yes and figured out the right resources and hired the right people. And I'll talk about our team in a little bit. But as you can see, probably around 2016, we started doing EV infrastructure, and it was kind of by accident. It was mainly because we were doing engineering for custom homes, and people wanted EV chargers. And so we kept doing that, and then that kind of evolved into doing bigger and bigger EV projects. From our perspective, EV is relatively easy because it's another appliance. But now that EV is becoming so commonplace, we're raising our hands and say, hey, we've had 8 years of doing this. So, and then in 2022, we expanded to Canada. I moved my family from Southern California, and now we live here in Halifax. Here's our team. We have a total of 9 of us. We're spread across 4 different time zones, and it looks a little strange with the circles, but I wanted to display the importance of everyone. Like, everyone is as important as the other person. I wasn't a fan of kind of the triangular org chart. And we're spread across 2 different countries as well. So we have an office, and I put office in quotations because we've never had a physical office since I started the firm. And of course, COVID made it easier for people to adopt the way we do business. So I guess that's the only positive that came out of COVID. Here's kind of where our teammates are across the US and across Canada. Also where we hold licenses. So I wanted to bring this up because we've dealt with so many jurisdictions and so many areas with so many different requirements as it relates to EV design. And I'm also licensed in Ontario and Nova Scotia as well. Here's a quick snapshot of some of our projects. They're heavily concentrated in California, just because that's where we were founded, but we're very quickly expanding to other states throughout the US as well as Canada. Now, so for you guys are probably tired of hearing me talk about myself. So what we are here to talk about. So the current landscape in the US, and then I'll go into Canada as well. So this was a pretty striking chart to me to show the disparities in terms of how many chargers there actually are throughout the country. And this focuses on on fast charging. And so as you can see, Wyoming, which there aren't many people, is high up at the top in terms of number of fast charging stalls in comparison to number of electric cars. And it just gets drastically worse. And I didn't put all 50 states because as you get past Illinois, it just looks bleaker and bleaker. And I can attest to this because me and my family drove from Southern California to Maine and then took the ferry over to Nova Scotia. So as we're driving and you're kind of bored sometimes, I'm like looking for EV chargers, like, hey, I wonder if I had an EV right now, would I actually make it? And the answer is definitely no. I mean, there are some places you didn't even have gas stations. So it's very problematic. And in places where I did see fast chargers, it was usually the Tesla chargers. There was always a long line. And anyone in here have a Tesla? Nope. So quite often, people are waiting there a really long time, and that's assuming that every single charger is operational. Here's Canada and the provinces. Of course, Yukon is at the top because there's just a lot less people. And as you move down, you look at Quebec, who has the most EV cars. There's still only, 2.15 stalls per 100 cars? And yeah, that's pretty unfortunate.
Does that include stalls that don't work?
I'm pretty sure it's every stall. So, and this doesn't show level 2 chargers. Like I think I saw a level 2 charger sitting outside of here.
One of the 2 words.
Yeah, right. Statistically speaking. So I put this quick chart together to show the zero emissions goals for US and Canada. And so as you can see, the US has a goal of 50% of cars sold be electric vehicles by 2030 and 2/3 of the cars sold by 2032. Canada, 20% of cars sold be electric vehicles by 2026. 60% by 2030 and 100% by 2035. And clearly we have a long way to go. Per the Rob report that I just pulled up, roughly 7% of vehicles sold in the US as of July were EVs. So I don't think they're going to make it. Now here's some zero emissions goals for Canada. I found this cool little chart on electricautonomy.ca, and it talks about the percentage of new vehicle registrations comparing EVs to non-EVs. And as you can see, in Q2 of 2023, you had a little over 10% of the cars registered, new cars being registered as EVs. And so right now with registrations at a little over 10%, that doubled since Q2 of 2021, which was about 5%. And even if you continue to double that going forward, I'm still not sure they're going to meet Canada's requirements of 20% by 2026. And if there's anybody in here who has more insight than me on these statistics, please speak up. All right, so first things first. It's important before you start installing EV chargers to reach out to the local municipality. Quite often, if you're in a small municipality, they may not have adopted any type of EV requirements. So quite often, we as engineers are educating them on what they should do. Larger cities, Halifax, Toronto, places like that, they do. I've seen In some jurisdictions, this is related to California, where there has to be one EV charger for every unit in the multifamily dwelling, which is amazing, right? Or it'll have to be a certain percentage of total parking spots. So my point being, make sure you reach out to the local jurisdiction before you start putting shovels into the ground. Sorry, there we go. And for those who are less familiar about the types of EVs, or I'm sorry, the EV chargers, you have level 1, which you essentially plug into a wall. It takes you forever to charge, so most people don't do that. Level 2, that's when I mentioned when you get to level 2, that's when you should start reaching out to your local jurisdiction. Those are typically what a Tesla would install in your garage. And you really need to do specific load calculations to make sure that you have the capacity in your panel to install something like that. And that charges a lot faster than level 1. And then the DC fast chargers, those are the big ones that you see in the big parking lots with Tesla. Those are typically 480 volt and they're 3-phase. And they say it takes 20 minutes, but that depends on a lot of variables, including weather. Now, in terms of the engineer's role in this, so when we get a call for a project, we have a pretty strict list of things that we need to go down before we start diving into the doing the actual design work. So understand the existing power infrastructure. You as the clients or municipality, whoever, you need to understand exactly what you want. Do you want level 2? Do you want DC fast chargers? Do you even have access to the appropriate voltage in the area to get you to what you need? There have been times where those questions, those answers were not provided to us, and then come to find out we have to install, expensive transformers and things like that because they don't have the appropriate voltage. So when your engineer asks for something, please give it to them in a timely fashion. Also determine how many chargers that you can have depending on the type that you want, whether that's level 2 or 3. And then bring in your engineers very early because then we can run calculations on the existing loads inside the building. And that also involves getting electric bills if we're unable to determine what your existing loads are. Sometimes you have a building that's really, really old, and a lot has changed. And so sometimes you have to get the peak demand from your electric bills. And a caveat about that is make sure that you're analyzing the correct month depending on where the project is. So if I'm in the desert somewhere, I'm going to look at peak loads in August and September, right, when it's really, really hot and a lot of people are using air conditioning. If it's here, maybe I'm looking in the dead of winter when people are using all electric heat. And you may be limited on, you're getting some emails here. You may be limited on charger location, so it's always best to flush that out as well because there have been instances where they have an ideal location, but the panel is 300 feet away. And so when we're designing, we're saying, okay, you sure you want it here? And if they say yes, now we're running voltage drop calculations, which means maybe you're getting really big copper wires or you're getting multiple feeds of wires. And as everybody in construction in here knows, the cost of everything is going up. So try to find a location that's as close to your main panel as possible. Now, which charger to pick? So there are, it's exhausting the number of charger manufacturers out there. Quite a few that I'm just learning within the past couple months, and that's because we now have a director of communications, and her role is to actually go out there and get us work. So quite a few manufacturers want to partner with us to kind of be their go-to engineering firm. And so we're learning a lot about their technology, and to us, it's just another appliance as long as you all list it, and I don't hear that you're catching fire. We're equipment agnostic. It also depends on how much power you have available, because some chargers are rated higher than others. And if you're installing multiple chargers, do you have the physical space for multiple 50 or 40 or 50 amp breakers inside your panel? And if you don't, now you have to upgrade your panel, which comes at an additional cost. Also, the big one is warranty. So as you guys kind of joked about, with chargers constantly going down, and that's a really huge deal that I'm learning about. Make sure that they have an appropriate warranty, and find out how robust their service department is. So if you're here in Dartmouth and you get a product that's manufactured hundreds of miles away or another province, do they actually have a team here that can actually service your system when it inevitably goes down? Now, I don't like doing small print, but I want to fit all this on here. So please don't try to read this. Now, once all these steps are done, is this a pointer? No, it's not. So on the far, your left, on the far left, that's a site plan. So once we collected all this information, we know where the chargers are going to be. We know how much capacity you have, how many chargers that you have, or that you want to install. Then we create the site plan showing exactly where they are. We show the feeder routing. So the feeders are the actual pipe and wire and how they're routed to the electrical panel. And then from there we create what's called the panel schedule, which tells the electrician exactly where to install those circuits. And then we balance it so that across the bus bar you have equal amount of current flowing. And then we do the single line diagram. All of these items are then packaged up in a stamped package, and then you take it into the city, and they get mad about something, and then we go round and round and round until we've answered all of their questions adequately, and then you go and build. All right, so best practices. Electrical engineers can add a ton of value up front to help you to avoid costly mistakes. You may need to get a civil engineer on board depending on your project, because they may have to do some type of site planning. Oh, and I think we already touched on warranty and service. Actually, I meant to add that again because it's extremely important. Some of our example projects, we did the EV infrastructure at the Oakland International Airport. We've done some work for the new rental car facility at LAX Airport. This one is a little interesting because at the airport, or any large facility where you have multiple tenants, everyone has a certain amount of power that's allocated to them. And this became very problematic as we're doing the design work, because the client tells us one thing, but then LAX tells the client another thing. So now we're having to be really creative with where we're going to get the power from. And going back to my point about running long feeders, we had to run really big feeders to a much more convenient location for them. So this would have been an example of them bringing us in way earlier so that we can say, hey, why don't you put the electrical room here instead of there? We do quite a few parks type projects, which I'll kind of pose some questions to you guys about that a little bit later. We also do quite a bit of warehouse work. So a lot of forklifts are going all electric. And so we've done some work for like Wayfair, Home Depot, folks like that. I think we did some Amazon work. I can't remember. But yeah, those are pretty robust charging systems. Now, where do we go from here? So brownouts may become a real reality based on the current grid, especially if in a perfect world, the car manufacturers are producing the amount of EVs that are needed and people are buying them at the rate that we need to get them to zero, get us to zero emissions. And yes, solar excuse me, solar helps, but what happens between 4 to 9 when everybody's coming home and the sun is going down? So it's a lot of things that the utilities have to figure out to make sure that these systems are robust enough to handle these. We also need to take into account fleet charging in heavy-duty vehicles. I'm mainly focusing on light-duty vehicles. Well, what about the 18-wheeler trucks or more forklifts and things like that? Smart charging is going to have to become the norm. So on the LAX project, we worked with a smart charging organization, and essentially it looks like a big switchboard, and it tells the system who needs power the most depending on habits. And that allows you to need less of a service upgrade, because let's say you have, 1,000 amps worth of EV charging. Well, now maybe you only need 400 amps because you have this smart system. So folks out there developing these are going to do very well for themselves. And then also the labor. One thing I immediately realized when I moved here is that there's a huge labor shortage, much more than what I experienced in the States. So how are we going to address that? Even if we have all the money in the world to make this happen, we actually need people to go build it. All right, so this was kind of a fun exercise because it allowed me to kind of think pie in the sky if everything was EV and it was like the Jetsons and, everybody was all electric. Establish municipal public charge stations at certain distance apart on highways. I don't even think I'm not sure if anyone is even thinking about that. Maybe having, every 400 kilometers, there has to be an EV station, and maybe making it go off grid, because with the current utility structure, I just don't see us getting there anytime soon. Parking lots. So this irritates me. A lot of major big box stores have these huge parking lots, and I've never seen them full ever. And I think it would behoove the government to make sure that unused parking spaces are dedicated for charging. Another thing, gas stations. We have gas stations everywhere. I think it would be amazing to have every gas station have some type of electric vehicle infrastructure component to it, and maybe even make it government funded so that they have some type of rebate program or incentive to actually be able to do it. But then now you're going back in the circle of who's going to build it. For streets, and I'm going to go to the next one, for street lighting. So that picture on the far right here that says rapid electric charging point, me and my family were in London over New Year's this past year, and as we're sleepily walking to the train station to catch our next flight, I ran into this taxi that was being charged, and I've never seen that before. And what allows them to do that easily is because their street lights run on 240 or 230, either one. And so that allows them to have level 2 charging at the street. So imagine if in every new street or retrofitting every street light, you had 240, so that a lot of poles you're able to then put EV charging. Another thing that kind of popped into my head is that why not create a network of charging stations at single-family homes for those who want to participate, especially if you have large enough capacity at your home on your panel. Why not put something at the curb? Somebody comes and they sit and pay you, right? I don't know, have your kids sell treats while they're waiting, but especially the way the cost of goods are going up, and people are out there struggling. Like, this is a way for everybody to make money who owns a home. Here's something that I've been following this for quite a while: induction charging. So This is when you literally drive on a road that's lined with induction charging that charges your car while you're driving. So in theory, you never really have to stop while you're on the highway. I was thinking about this years ago when I worked in government defense, because I worked on a system called the EMALS and AAG, which is essentially taking a battleship, ripping out all the guts that allow jets to be stopped or catapulted off a ship. And it was a series of a bunch of magnets that propelled it or stopped it. And so my thought was, why couldn't we apply this to EV charging, where you have a trough and it's just nothing but induction magnets down there that allows you to charge a vehicle as you drive? But clearly people are way ahead of me on this because it's been going on for a little while. There are a lot of companies working in this wireless space. There's a municipality, and I cannot remember the name of it, in the States, where the buses, the city buses, will drive over this huge metal plate and they'll just sit and charge. So I kind of got through this a little bit early, but I want to leave time for questions. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. It was excellent presentation. So time for questions, guys. Yes.
Thank you for the presentation. I was just wondering, when you mentioned the network of like residential chargers, I've heard of like apps, kind of like Airbnb, where you can like rent a charger for a certain amount of hours. I don't think we have them in Canada, but I'm just curious, like in the States and in California, like does that exist?
I've never heard of that.
I mean, this just came up because like when I was doing my master's, we came up with this brilliant idea, but then apparently other people have already thought of it as well. So, but like I wasn't aware of it in North America, and I know that obviously the States is ahead of us here. So, okay, I was just curious.
No, I think that seems to be an even quicker way than having people install a bunch of extra chargers at the curb. But of course, you got to think about safety and all that stuff. But I think that's an amazing idea.
If you're looking for investors, let me know. Questions, guys? More questions? Yeah. Oh.
So I know California has had a lot of EV adoption for a lot of years. Here in Nova Scotia, we still seem to be stuck in the mode of which comes first, the chicken or the egg. So there's a lot of people that are willing to buy a car, but are appalled by the infrastructure that we have so far for DC fast charging. I cover the province from end to end with an EV, and I can tell you there's days where you wish that you were driving something else because of the fact that charging stations, and they're all singular, and now if you're not driving a Tesla, they're all singular, and they're all limited to about 50 kilowatts.
Wow.
So you have all these people with this amazing technology that can charge their cars at 250 or 300 kilowatts, and everybody is stuck at 50 kilowatts at a single station. So you know that if you're the third car deep, you're at least 2 hours at a station before you even get on. So then there's areas of the province right now that just have nothing. Like the hub of the province, the Truro area, has 0 DC fast charging stations. So you can go from one end of from Amherst all the way to Sydney, and you might have 4 DC fast charging stations on that entire route of about 350 kilometers, and that's a direct through fare from one province to another. So there's still a lot of work that has to be done, and if we're going to get to the point that it encourages us to, and more people to buy additional cars, the infrastructure has to come up. Just wondering if you have any thoughts or ideas as to who can run point on that within the province of Nova Scotia in order to encourage and at least educate people as to what the plans are.
I think it's, I think the years that they placed on the zero emissions goals, I think they're a bit too lofty. When I first moved here, so we sold my wife's car, and I drive a SUV, and we're like, all right, we're going to get this Kia, whatever, I forget the name of it, the electric vehicle, and we couldn't find it anywhere. You walk into the dealerships, and they just got a chart sitting there. So you just walk in, you know exactly what you're getting. And I'm kind of glad that we didn't, because after being here, like you said, I would have been struggling. I think they should have, first of all, they should have tiered it to say, hey, the percentage of vehicles sold, that needs to include the hybrid, the plug-in hybrids, and then start phasing those out, and then start doing EV, all electric. But it's really going to come down to to Nova Scotia Power, to be honest. That's, like I said, if you do everything right, car manufacturers manufacture, everybody's buying it, but then you don't have the power companies stepping up, then I don't know what to do.
Just as a secondary, in California, is it utilities that are taking charge of installing? I know at DC fast charger, you're looking at $100,000 enough if you're going to install something.
Yeah.
Very few private industries are looking at installing DC fast charging.
Yeah.
And just speaking with some of the other players in the U.S., it's always been utility.
So, at least in Southern California, there seems to be an unlimited amount of power. I've never had it where they said, we can't give you power, you just may have to wait 18 months. I know that's not true, right? As more people buy EVs, that's going to become problematic, but it's all about capacity. I know I just saw on the news, they were talking about offshore windmills, but how long is that going to take? So, there was no problem in California. It was just long lead times. That was it.
Just before that next question comes in, could I just interject related to that? Because Anthony, you said when you came to Canada, you went from Maine directly across to New Brunswick. And you missed, right across Nova Scotia, and you missed New Brunswick. So in New Brunswick, they actually have a program right now where they are putting in exactly like you envisioned. Every 100 kilometers down the road, they're putting in EV chargers.
Good.
Fast chargers. And they're putting them in at gas stations and other places like that. Irving signed on early, so then New Brunswick Power partnered with Emmerich and get some additional funding related to that, so we've been working with them for
Well,
the last 35 chargers.
It sounds like they need to.
Program for probably another.
It sounds like New Brunswick needs to be leading this effort then.
They'll do the next presentation.
I'm curious, how many chargers are they putting at each station?
The new ones, they're gonna be putting in 300 kilowatt chargers, so level 3 fast chargers.
One plug, right?
All separate.
The three 100 kilowatt fast chargers,
Are they tower shared or are they separate?
separate.
And then that brings up capacity, because a lot of people are moving to New Brunswick. So, making sure that you're kind of future-proofing that, if you will.
The current ones they have they don't have as many, they're only one level 3 and one.
Yeah.
They're upgrading that. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I mean, it's something, but it's still got a long way to go.
Well, and I think too, I'm not sure if Mark from Nova Scotia Power is still around, but Nova Scotia Power did a similar thing about, 5 years ago. The challenge, that's why I had the comment, about does that include the ones that don't work? And I'm really interested to see what happens in New Brunswick, because in Nova Scotia, and this is leading to the question, not only about essentially who is responsible for approving these, getting them built, but when we have a DC fast charger that goes down, there seems to be just kind of like this, everybody's like, wow, who is supposed to fix this? So in the case of the Nova Scotia Power sponsored installation of chargers, they are largely at either gas stations or there's some that are in the parking lots of a grocery store or something, but they are down often, and depending on the level of repair required, there doesn't seem to be like a point of whose responsibility is this? So the question, I guess, is generally, is there actually like a business model for fast charging, right? So it seems to me that if this was a business and you're providing a service and the service is down, then your business is not successful, right? So is that model being applied to fast charging, or is it more like, well, this is a need that the government needs to pay for?
So yes, I've seen companies, EV manufacturers who have some type of maintenance program, but again, depending on where they're located, can they truly service everywhere? And I've also seen it where they're just providing the equipment and it's up to you. I think it would be great if the local, the local electrician tradesmen, they had a division that was strictly on servicing DC chargers, because I think that's an amazing business opportunity for someone. And then even the companies who service gas stations, right? Because if a gas pump is down, I guarantee you there's somebody there fixing it pretty quickly. So there's some type of infrastructure already there, so why not add servicing to, I think adding servicing EV infrastructure to that.
Just like, just a couple, yeah. One thing, first and foremost, the 50 kW chargers that were installed across the province. We went to the board for approval on that, which was declined at the time. It ended up being a federal, provincial, and Emera invested project that was installed across the province. That's one thing. On the other bit, there's the IBEW local union that is offering courses, by the way,
Good,
for electricians and contractors on EV installation, EV charging installations best practices. So that's both on the level 2 and DC fast charging installation. So just something to keep in mind as well. There is that's happening locally. It's in Lakeside. So
Good to know. Thank you. For
Thank you,
that.
thank you.
Are you with Nova Scotia Power?
yeah.
Oh, so all the hate is going to be going towards you. I'm just kidding.
Hey, just to tack on to a couple of the other questions and to acknowledge that Efficiency Nova Scotia has a lot of great grants along with NRCan. But do you think that there should be more funding for like the upkeep with like the warranty, and also I know for a lot of small businesses or medium businesses, like their peak demand goes way up and their energy is multiplied on their utility bills, which they may not account for. And of course, yeah, it doesn't really make a business case from the deployments that I've been part of. So I was just curious to know what your thoughts are on additional funding, like on the upkeep and maintenance and additional costs that come down the line.
I think if the government is dictating that new car sales have to be XYZ by this date, I think it should be. If they didn't, then it's all on you. And to your point about peak demand and your bills multiplying, depending on when that peak demand is, I would even argue coupling your EV installation with battery backup so that during those peak demand times you're able to discharge from the batteries, but that's going to be a big battery and very expensive. So everything keeps coming down to money.
Money, money, money. One final question. Yes.
Hi, thank you. We're building a few multi-res, high-rise properties. If you were planning to develop and own these properties for the next 20 years, how many circuits and how many EV charging stations would you have in the garage?
Well, how many units?
Yeah.
I would say one per unit.
That
Yeah, level 2. Yeah.
level 2. That's a lot of load. That's a lot of load.
It is. That's why you bring in smart charging, so that you don't need as robust of an electrical system. Or you as the landlord or owner of the building, why not have a parking lot with a bunch of DC fast chargers if you can get it, and then potentially charge the tenants or include it in their rent? I don't know, but there's tons of opportunity for you as the owner.
When it comes to sharing the circuits, then, would you have one circuit per charging station, or would you share the power across a few charging stations?
Well, if you have so think of the smart charging system as a black box. You have one circuit going to that, one big circuit going to that then feeds each individual charger.
Essentially, like guarantees each tenant a certain amount of time, right? Like they'll each get up to like what 6 hours or something and they can charge in.
Not necessarily, because you have some people who, maybe work from home, so their car's always charging. So you just maybe need a little bit of trickle charging. Where somebody who goes into the office every day, all day, the system will know that, and is able to divert more power to the person who's coming back home. So it depends on kind of your tenant's habits.
Done with questions. So, well, no, Anthony, I would say thank you very much for your presentation. It was
Thank you.
amazing. Thank you for being a speaker.